Good morning, one and all. Today's topic for discussion is molecular markers of early cervical neoplasia. First, the introduction part. We know that cervical cancer is one of the most common cancers among females worldwide. It is second most common following breast cancer. HPV is the main etiological agent for vast majority of all the pre-malignant and malignant lesions of the cervix. And it is said that up to 90 to 95% of cervical dysplasias and carcinomas are associated with high-risk HPV types. So we know that HPV is one of the most important causative organisms, but not all HPV infected individuals progress to malignancy. So there are some of the cofactors like smoking and other sexually transmitted diseases, parity of the person, and sexual promiscuity, which can contribute to turning into pre-malignant and malignant lesions. So we'll be discussing mainly about HPV testing. So this has been widely adopted in around many countries for triage of patients. So it can be used in the settings of following a cervical cytology screening test. It can be used to classify or triage the patients, and also it can be used in conjunction with cervical cytology. So we'll go on to human papilloma virus, which is a virus belonging to the Papilloma viridae. So it is a small virus, about 8 kilobytes in size. It is a non-enveloped double-stranded circular DNA type of virus. And there are about 140 subtypes which have been recognized, but about 80 of them have been fully sequenced. We know that not all of them are oncogenic. So oncogenesis is based on a few types of viruses which are called as high-risk HPV groups. Among them, HPV 16 is the most commonly involved virus. It is seen in about up to 53 to 62% of cases, which is followed by HPV 18 subtype, which is seen in 13 to 15% of cases. The other high-risk HPV groups which are involved in carcinogenesis are 31, 33, 35, 39, 45, 51, 52, 56, 58, 59, 68, and 66. So there are other HPV types also called as low risk HPV, which are which are subtypes 6, 11, 40, 42, 54, and 57. And these are associated with genital warts or condyloma acuminata. So moving on to genetics part. So HPV genome contains 6 early and 2 late genes or open reading frames. And these early genes are mostly associated with viral replication and regulation of replication, like in E1 and E2, which are involved in viral replication and transcription regulation. E4 is known to disrupt cytokeratins, and E5 allows the virus to interact with growth factor receptors. Now, the most important genes will be the E6 and E7, which are involved in oncogenesis. So E6 is known to degrade P53 tumor suppressor gene, and E7 is known to bind with the tumor suppressor gene RB gene and inactivate it. So there are two more late genes which are L1 and L2, which code for capsid proteins, and this L1 gene is known to be used in L1 protein is known to be used in vaccines like Gardasil and so this is the genome of the HPV, again to show the L1 and L2, which are the outermost capsid, and L1 is used in preparation of vaccines. This E6 and E7 part are the most oncogenic genes of the HPV virus, and the E1 to E5 are known for regulating replication, viral replication. So going on to HPV-induced carcinogenesis, we know that E6 and E7 are the main genes which are involved. So E6, we know that it is already inhibiting P53, and it is also known to inhibit BAC. Because of this, apoptosis will be inhibited, and this leads to cellular immortalization. Again, this is also known to stimulate telomerases and SAR kinases. This leads to proliferation of the cell and cellular immortalization. So E7 again plays a main role in regulating RB gene and the binding of it to elongation to factor. So this will be discussed in detail in the next slide. So it is also known to inhibit P21 and P27 and also cyclin A and E. This leads to cellular proliferation and cellular immortalization. So going on to the role of E7 in the RB gene E to F factor complex. So in the normal stable cell which is inactive and not replicating, this RB gene will be bound to the elongation factor. So this will prevent the cell from progressing into cell proliferation, cell cycle. So during cellular proliferation, this RB gene will be detached from the E2F. So this E2F will start transcription factors to push the cell into the synthetic phase. So normally, what happens is when the E2F is increasing in quantity, this will cause an upregulation of the P16 molecule. So P16 will cause a production of protein, which is also called P16, and this will inhibit cyclic dependent kinases 4 and 6, and it will also stop the cells, stop the signals of cellular proliferation by causing binding of the RB gene with the E2F again. So this will prevent the cell from proliferating excessively. So what happens when E7 binds to RB gene? So this will prevent the binding of the RB gene with the E2F. So the E2F will be saying alone, it will be constantly pushing the cells into the synthetic phase, and there will be excessive cellular proliferation and an aberrant S phase will be present. Because of the high quantities of E2F in the circulation, this will go and cause a massive upregulation of the P16. So there will be an increase in P16, which we usually use as an indirect marker for the detection of HPV. So we know there are two types of HPV infections, the productive and the non-productive ones. So in the productive HPV infections, the HPV DNA will be in an episomal state, and in this episomal state, the E1 and E2 open reading frames will prevent the expression of the E6 and E7. There are some conditions called non-productive HPV infections. This happens when the viral DNA will integrate into the host genome. During the process of this integration, this E1 and E2 sites will be disrupted. Because of this, there will be an unregulated overexpression of the E6 in E7. This will be because of the loss of inhibition from the E1 and E2 factors. So this the prolonged HPV infections along with the viral DNA integration into host genome will cause progression to high-grade dysplasias and carcinomas. So the cervical screening in most countries is usually based on cervical cytology, which is used as a primary modality. But many countries are also using HPV testing in conjunction with PAP cytology. So cervical cytology has a low sensitivity but very high specificity. The low sensitivity is due to there can be some positive cases which can turn out to be falsely negative. This can be because of improper sampling or inadequate samples which are sent, or it can be due to defects in preservation of the smear. So normally when the PAP is negative, we go for routine screening at intervals of 3 years or 5 years. And when we detect a cytological abnormality which is equal to or above ASCUS, which is atypical squamous cells of undetermined significance, then we do a colposcopy. So this is the routine cervical screening. So the English screening programs are using HPV testing along with the cervical cytology to triage the borderline and low-grade abnormalities. So going on to HPV testing, so it can be used in three ways. So it can use, like the English screening programs, they can be used for triage of low-grade cytological abnormalities, and it can also be used as in something called as a test of cure, and it can in some cases be used as a primary screening agent. So this is the same thing. In low-grade abnormalities, we triage the patient as HPV positive or negative. If the patient is HPV negative, then the patient can again be followed up on a routine basis. If the patient is HPV positive, then we do immediate colposcopy. Usually, post-treatment of a pre-malignant or malignant condition, the patient will require an annual cytological examination for the next 10 years, which can be a very huge psychological burden for the patient. In these conditions, we can use a follow-up screening of cytology and HPV on the first time. So mostly the negative results will be seen on follow-up up to 85% of the cases. So this can reduce the psychological burden for the patient. And in primary screening, only few modalities have been used, like COBAS and hybrid capture 2. These have high sensitivity for detection but low specificity. This high sensitivity is because these methods detect whether HPV is present or not, and not whether it is a low-grade cytological abnormality or high-grade cytological abnormality. So it just indicates that HPV is present, but we know that not all HPV will be progressing to pre-malignant and malignant conditions. So we'll be going on to the molecular detection techniques which have been used. The first one to be devised was a hybrid capture 2 or HC2. This is the first FDA approved technique which was used. And in this, we were using RNA probes. These RNA probes will be targeted to DNA targets for 13 high-risk HPV types. So this RNA probe will be hybridized with the DNA target, and this hybrid of RNA and DNA will be detected using monoclonal antibodies. So the method will be, there will be a chemiluminescent signal which is sent out, which will be detected. The principle of it is hybrid capture and the chemiluminescent signal amplification technique, where the signal, luminescent signal is amplified rather than the target HPV DNA itself, in contrast to PCR, where the DNA or material will be, genetic material will be amplified. So since the chemiluminescent detection is the method of detection, the cutoff will be, the unit will be relative light units, and the cutoff is 2 relative light units, below which if there is less light signal, then it will be regarded as negative. So the procedure is, this test sample is added to the reaction vessel, after which a denaturation agent is added to this test sample, which will degrade the cell and it will release the viral DNA particles inside. After which we add the complementary RNA probes. This RNA and DNA, if the DNA is present, it will hybridize with it, forming a hybrid. With this hybrid, we transfer it into a microwell plates, which will be having capture antibodies. So this antibody will bind to the RNA DNA hybrid. After which the supernatant is removed and we add another antibody enzyme conjugate. After which we wash and remove the unbound antibodies and the unbound enzymes. After this set, we add a chemiluminescent substrate, and this will light up if the DNA RNA hybrid is present. So this is the steps again. We denature the DNA of the virus and we add sequence RNA probes are added, and this will be hybridized. With this hybridized RNA DNA, we add a antibody. This antibody will be transferred to the microwell plates, after which we add an antibody with bound enzymes, after which we add a substrate which will light up upon the DNA, if the RNA DNA hybrid is detected. So this will be the microwell plates which will be lighting up like this when the chemiluminescent signals are present, and it will be graded as relative light units. So the advantages of this technique is, it is the results are reproducible and it is easier to do and cheaper when compared to PCR. But the limitations are, this hybrid capture 2 assay is qualitative only, in that it cannot distinguish between the various genotypes. So we are introducing 13, we have the RNA probes for 13 types of high risk HPV, but it can't distinguish between the 13 types. And also there is a lot of cross reactivity of the assay to low risk HPV genotypes also, like 642, and also to possible high risk types like 53 and 66. So this can result in a false positive result. And also there is a lack of an internal control. So this can lead to false negative results in case by means of cellularity. If there is an inadequate cellularity, it won't be detected because of a lack of internal cellular control. So going on to the next, which is Cervista HR and Cervista HPV 16/18. So Hologic is the company which is producing this. Cervista was the next one which followed the HC2 screening test. So the first one is HPV HR test screens. It is screening for 14 high risk HPV. So in addition to the 13, we have added in the HC2, we have added type 66, which is also included in Cervista. Cervista HPV 16/18, it is a very specific test, genotyping test, which can determine the presence of type 16 and 18. So this genotyping assay is used as a follow-up or a reflex test after a positive result on the Cervista HPV HR test, and it should not be used as a standalone test. So the principle of it is called as an invader probe chemistry. So here we can see that the this is the mechanism by which it acts. The invader chemistry includes two isothermal reactions. In the first reaction, we'll be adding a sequence specific probe for the target, and we'll be also including an invader probe. This invader probe will come in between the target and this sequence probe and will partially bind to the target. So in this brief interaction, there will be a secondary structure like this Y which is formed. Then this secondary structure will be detected by an enzyme which we are introducing. And this enzyme will be cleaving this sequence probe, and the remaining part of it is called as a flap. So this flap will go again, and it will react with the second isothermal reaction will be its interaction with something called as a hairpin oligonucleotide which we are introducing. This will be utilizing a fluorescence resonance and fluorescent resonant energy transfer. So this has two molecules on it. One is the fluorochrome molecule and the other will be a quencher molecule. Upon the interaction of this flap with this hairpin oligonucleotide, there will be a cleavage of the site which will produce a fluorescence. So this is the mechanics of the invader probe technology. So this advantages will be, there is a minimum sample requirement which is half that of the hybrid capture technique. And the second is there is not much cross reactivity when compared to the previous hybrid capture assays. But disadvantages are that there is still some amount of cross reactivity to HPV subtypes like 67 and 70. And this Cervista HPV 16/18, which is specific for 16 and 18, is known to have cross reactivity when there are high levels of subtype 31, which is present, and it can mimic a HPV 16 positive result. Going on to the next one, which is called as a GenProbe Aptima. So the Aptima is the test and GenProbe is a company. So this is the only FDA approved method which is known to detect mRNA rather than the DNA. So we know that the DNA will be integrating with the viral DNA will be integrating with the host genome prior to causing pre-malignant and malignant conditions. And at that point, we cannot detect the HPV DNA. So mRNA detection can be a useful method. So the principle is a transcription mediated amplification technology. So this follows the capture of the mRNA target and amplifying it using reverse transcriptases and T7 RNA polymerases, and followed by which the RNA amplicons are detected by using a hybridization protection assay. So the advantage of it being we can detect the mRNAs, and this increases the clinical specificity for the cervical cancer because of the integration of the viral genome with the host genome. So this is the method by which mechanism of this test. So first the target, which is the target mRNA sequence, it will be captured using a capture sequence. This capture sequence will be attached with a microparticle which is magnetic. So this will be attached to the walls of the microvelles, after which the captured mRNA sequence is amplified by transcription mediated amplification by using of reverse transcriptases and RNA polymerases. So we will obtain multiple RNA amplicons. These amplicons will be then detected by using a hybridization protection assay. So the purple colored ones are the RNA amplicons, and then we have some labeled probes which are attached. This labeled probes will be detected by using a luminometer. So upon we have some selective enzymes which are also added, which will destroy the labeled probe if they are not attached to the RNA amplicons. So this bound labeled probe with the RNA amplicons will be detected by the luminometer. Going on to the next technique, which is Abbott real-time and Roche COBAS. So COBAS is one of the common tests which has been used across many countries. So both are utilizing real-time PCR to detect the HPV DNA, and they can also simultaneously detect HPV 16 and 18, and it can detect other high-risk, 12 other high-risk types of non-HPV 16 or non-HPV 18 types. So we know the PCR amplifies the DNA target, and it is then detected. The sample used is cervical cells in liquid cytology media. So the COBAS HPV test, it is interesting to know that it is the first FDA approved test used as a primary screening tool. It can be used without a cervical cytology also. So the one which was initially introduced was Cobas HPV 4800 in 2014. Now we have Cobas HPV 6800 and 8800. And this Cobas HPV has been used as a primary screening tool currently in Netherlands and in Australia. So this is the advantage of this technique being it can detect 12 genotypes as a pooled result, but this channel 2 and channel 3 will be individually detecting HPV 16 and HPV 18, unlike the other previous two, which requires a separate genotypic assay to identify if 16 and 18 are present. And it also has the advantage that in channel 4, they have an internal cellular control on their own. So we can easily reduce the numbers of false negative cases. So as I said, the advantage is it does not require a separate genotyping assay, and because of the internal control, it increases the confidence in the quality of the specimen and reduces the number of false negative cases. And it also does not have any cross-reactivity with low-risk HPV subtypes. So the primary HPV screening algorithm as per Cobas is the HPV test will be used as the primary screening modality. If it is HPV negative, we follow up the patient. If the patient is having HPV 16 or 18 positive, we do colposcopy. And if other 12 high-risk HPVs apart from 16 and 18 are positive, then we do a cytology. In PAP test, if it is negative, we do follow-up routinely. And if the lesion of abnormality of ascus or more is present, then we go on to do a colposcopy. Again, Cobas can also be used as a, in many US and UK countries, it is being used as a co-testing, in which it has two categories, women aged between 25 to 29 and women above 30 years. If the female is aged between 25 and 29, the primary modality will be the usage of a PAP. If the PAP is negative, we follow up. If we detect a lesion above ascus, then we do a colposcopy. If we are seeing an atypical squamous cell of undetermined significance, then we do a HPV test. If the HPV is negative, we do a follow-up. But if the high-risk HPV is positive, then we do a colposcopy. In women above 30 years, we do in conjunction a PAP test and a HPV test. In this test, if the PAP and HPV are both negative, then we follow up. If both of them are positive, we do a colposcopy. If the PAP test is negative for malignancies, but if we are having a HPV positive, then we have to differentiate whether it is the HPV 16 or 18 or if it is the other high-risk HPV groups. If it is HPV 16 or 18, then it indicates high risk. So we do a colposcopy. For the other cases, we do a routine follow-up. So this is the summary of all the molecular tests which we are doing. So the first one was the hybrid capture, and in which the DNA mixed genome will be the target, HPV target. And the principle we are using is hybrid capture with the chemiluminescent signal amplification. And this can be used as a co-testing. The second one was the Servista, which has a high HR, which is all the other 12 high-risk groups, and the HPV 16-18 specific genotypic assay. Both use the invader probe principle, and we have an internal control here. Again, it can be used for co-testing with Pap smear. The Aptima tests again have the mRNA. Both of them have the mRNA as the target, and the principle is transcription mediated amplification. And we have some exogenous controls which can be added, again used in co-testing. The final one, which is the Cobas HPV test, which will be using the L1 DNA as the target, and the principle is real-time PCR. We have an internal control of beta globulin. This can be used for co-testing as well as primary screening. So going on to some biomarkers which can be used apart from HPV. So biomarkers can be useful when we are taking a biopsy sample, and it can be, we have some indirect markers of HPV like P16 and also other proliferation markers which can be assisting in diagnosis of the case. So we have 6 groups of markers like cell cycle regulation markers, which are P53, P16, RB gene, P21, P27, and something called as a ProXC, which is a mixture of MCM2 and TOP2 alpha, and cyclin D1 and cyclin A and E. there are cell proliferation markers, mainly the MIB1, the c-MYC, and the PCNA, which stands for proliferating cell nuclear antigen. Then we have apoptosis markers like telomerase and survivin, and transcription markers like SKN1, OCT1, and AP2, and cell signaling pathway markers like ERK, P33 kinases, and JNK, and markers of productive HPV infection, which is the HPV L1 capsid protein. So we'll be seeing mainly about P16, this ProXC, and the Ki67, which is commonly used. So P16, as we already know, is an indirect marker for detection of HPV infection, which is commonly used in immunostaining. This P16 protein is derived from an CDKN2A tumor suppressor gene, the pathophysiology of which we already discussed. This P16 is involved in a negative feedback loop with the E2F-RB complex. The positive staining is called as a block positivity, where there is diffuse, strong cytoplasmic and nuclear staining pattern in the squamous and glandular lesions, which are associated with high-risk HPV. So these can be Hetzel and adenocarcinoma in situ. Low-grade lesions usually show a focal or scattered weak blush of P16. So this is just to refresh again to show how the E2F, when it is separated from the RB gene, it will be upregulating this P16. So E7 upon binding to RB will prevent the binding of RB to E2F. So there will be a constant increase in E2F, and this will be constantly upregulating P16. So hence the reason for increased P16 in HPV positive cases. So there are some lesions which are unassociated with HPV infection, which can stain for P16 positively. So we have to have know these lesions. One is squamous metaplasia, the other lesions are tubal metaplasia. These can have scattered weak blush of P16. Endometrioid adenocarcinoma and serous adenocarcinoma can have a diffuse positive staining for P16 also. So we have to keep in mind these conditions, because we have to rule out whether this is due to actual HPV infections or a squamous metaplasia. So this is a case where we can see a difference of P16 staining between the L-cell and the H-cell. In the histology slide, we can see there is a low-grade lesion involving the lower part of the ectocervix, and we can see some coilocytic change. And here we can see, though it is having an intense staining, it is the staining part of it is involving less than half of the thickness of the epithelium. In high grade lesion, we can see that the abnormality is extending up to the surface, and here we can see a diffuse, strong, intense block positivity with both cytoplasmic and nuclear staining. So here we can see another other two cases of low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesions. This again has more cytoplasmic staining in and occasional nuclear staining in less than half of the epithelium. And here we can see some weak staining of scattered clusters which are staining for P16. Going on to MIB1, which is the monoclonal antibody which detects Ka67 antigen in the nucleus. So this positive, we have to know that normally the parabasal cells will be positively staining for MIB1, and this should not be misinterpreted as a pre-neoplastic or pre-malignant lesion. So these squamous intraepithelial lesions are usually said to be positive when the cells are located in either the middle third or upper third of the whole thickness of epithelium. And in HCl, the whole layer will be diffusely showing nuclear positivity, whereas in L-cell we see that it won't be as diffuse as H-cell, it will be less diffuse with clusters of squamous cells staining in the upper two-thirds of the epithelium. So the pitfalls of interpretation with using MIB1 will be, there can be some cases of over-interpretation of positivity in case of inflamed and reactive epithelium, which will be having a high Ka67. And we can also, intraepithelial lymphocytes will also be staining positive. And in tangential sectioning, the parabasal cells can appear to be located more superficially, and this can result in a positive MIB1 staining. And also another shortcoming will be small size of the specimen, where the full thickness of the epithelium won't be seen, and this can be providing difficulty in the interpretation of Ka67. So we can use certain biomarkers together, like combined P16 and Ka67 markers. So this will be helping in differentiating whether it is a reactive epithelium or an immature metaplasia from an actual low-grade cytological abnormality, where in immature metaplasias there will be an absence P16 staining, but the Ka67 will be high, and the squamous intraepithelial lesions will be having the positive P16 staining. And K67 can also be useful in differentiating an atrophic epithelium from HSIL, where HSIL will be having a high K67 and atrophy will be having low to nil K67 positivity. So these are two images where we can see in the first image, this is the cells are all haphazardly arranged, and here in the second picture to show the absent P16 staining, and the third one is the Ka67, which we can see is increased. So this was a case of a reactive epithelium which was showing high MIB1 reactivity, but the P16 was low. P16 staining was negative. So this is a second case showing some metaplastic changes. We can see some large cells with moderate pleomorphism and some vesicular nuclei and eosinophilic cytoplasm with some mitosis is present. And the second one, which is the K67 staining, we can see nuclear positivity is present in many areas. And here the P16 staining is positive in not in all areas, but it is having cytoplasmic positivity and some areas having nuclear positivity. So this was a case of grade squamous intraepithelial lesion. Going on to the final topic, which is ProXC. So this is a combination of markers called mini microsome maintenance protein 2, which is MCM2, and a DNA topoisomerase 2 alpha, which is TOP2 alpha. So this MCM2 protein and topoisomerase alpha are both overexpressed when the S phase is aberrant. So MCM2 is known to be involved in loading the pre-replication complexes to the DNA and unwinding of the DNA through helicases activity, and the topoisomerase is known to enzymatically unlink the DNA during replication. So in HCl, there is a diffuse intensive full thickness staining, and in LCl there can be a variable pattern of staining. So the nuclear positivity, it is said to be positive when the nuclear positivity is above the basal third layer of the epithelium. And the important thing to notice that is this is negative in reparative or reactive conditions and immature squamous metaplasia. So it can be useful as a replacement for K67 in combined use of P16 and K67, where we can use combined P16 and ProXC, where this ProXC will be negative in cases of reactive reactive conditions and metaplastic changes. So this is a comparison showing this A and B pictures are reactive epithelium, and C and D are squamous intraepithelial lesions. So A is reactive epithelium with staining for Ka67. We can see that there are a lot of cells have taken up this nuclear positivity in comparison to this reactive epithelium, which is stained with ProXC. So ProXC shows very low positivity in comparison to the same case with stained with Ka67. And going on to the next, which is the low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesions. This is the Ka67, which we can see positivity, which is scattered. But in comparison with this, which is ProXC, we can see that more number of cells have been stained and taken positivity in the same case. So in conclusion, HPV testing is very useful as it can be either used as an assistive technique in to cervical cancer screening, or it can also be used primarily as a screening tool also. So when it is used as an assistive technology, it can be improving the sensitivity of the screening procedure. And there are many techniques available like the hybrid capture, the COBAS HPV, Aptima and Cervista. So COBAS is the one which has been used for primary screening of cervical cancers across Netherlands and Australia. And HPV testing, the other uses can be for triage and test of cure. And when coming to biomarkers, P16 is the one which is an indirect indicator of HPV infection. And we can use combined biomarkers to improve the diagnostic utility over a single biomarker, like using P16 and Ki67 together, or P16 and ProXC together. These are my references.
Kundabai?
Ma'am, HPV is mainly there are many proteins, ma'am. E6 and E7 is associated with the integration of viral genome, ma'am, with the host DNA. That is the pathogenic part here, ma'am. E6 is associated with P53 degradation, and RB gene, E7 RB gene binds with the RB gene and produces integration, ma'am, with the viral genome.
Okay. Vidya?
Ma'am, the RNA DNA hybrids are detected with monoclonal antibody. So they use signal amplification technique. The chemoluminescent signals are amplified.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Anelia?
Ma'am, the approved primary screening for cervical cancer is the COBAS HPV test, ma'am.
Okay, good. Vishnupriya?
Ma'am, MAB1 detects K67. There will be, in cases of inflamed or reactive epithelium, over-interpretation of this can be seen, and in intraepithelial lymphocytes, sometimes positivity can be seen. And because of the tangential sectioning, the parabasal cells may appear superficially, ma'am. And maybe it might be positive.
Yes. Paul?
And for ProXC, we have two components, that is MCM2 and top2 alpha, two components are.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Anisha,
Sir.
very nice presentation, Anusa. I need one clarification.
Yes,
anything about P53, because P53 is directly involved with E6, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
That's ISC, because they talked about KI67, P16. They talked anything about P53?
In this article, they didn't give P53 directly, so they were discussing more on P16 and E7. I will check, sir.
Yeah, please check, because KI67, you should not do it alone. You have to always do it with P53.
Yes,
and
sir.
both has to go hand in glove. If
Yes.
KI67 is very high, it can be regenerative. Okay, so
Okay, sir.
that's why we want to see both P53 and the KI67. You please check what is the reason.
Okay, sir.
Super.
Thank you, sir.
And do you know why we are not doing all these things, Anusha?
HPV testing, sir. Cost.
Super. And from where we are supposed to take for HPV test?
Transformation zone, sir.
Sample.
Sir?
Liquid-based cytology.
Liquid-based cytology, yes,
you
sir.
mentioned 1 or 2 times, but in the exam they will specifically ask. That's one advantage of liquid-based cytology. You don't have to ask the patient to come again.
Okay, Anusha, very good presentation. You covered all aspects. Just wanted to know, among all these techniques, which one is most widely used, and the sensitivity, the limit of detection, which one is much higher? Is there among the techniques that are used, which has the highest limit of detection in high sensitivity?
Cobas HPV is the one which is widely used, ma'am, now. Because it has, in the same test, we can run HPV 16 and 18, we can detect separately, whereas the other test will be requiring to do a separate genotypic assay. And Cobas is being used as a primary screening modality also.
And sensitivity remains almost similar among all these tests, or have they mentioned?
Cobas has a slight better sensitivity compared to this one. There is less of cross-reactivity in Cobas test when compared to the others like hybrid capture. So it has a better diagnostic utility.
Thank you, Anusha.
Thank you.
Anusha,
Sir?
I got my last question.
Yes, sir.
Since the patient is having HSIL cytology, HPV is negative for high risk, what will you do?
HPV,
you understand my question?
Yeah, yes, sir.
What is the question?
Like that in PAP cytology, it is positive, the patient is having HSIL, but then the HPV testing is negative.
Yes.
That is, we can repeat the HPV test.
For any other
organism. I'm not sure, sir.
Chlamydia and gonorrhea.
Okay, sir.
Okay, all these three has to be checked.
Okay, sir.
That's why that the hybrid technique you mentioned, there are some combinations where they will look for all the three organisms.
Okay.
These are the three major organisms that cause SIL.
Okay,
Chlamydia, gonorrhea, and HPV.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.